Open your Bibles and go to 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29. We are still in the moon god part of the series, the Last Days series section. We've been tracing the moon god based religious establishment throughout the Old Testament. I know some of you are already saying, okay, enough's enough, we believe you. And I know you do. You've been convinced. But there'll be others that say it's all a matter of coincidence. And they may not ever believe what this series preaches to be true. But it's not going to be because the information was not presented over and over thousands of years. Now, we started after the flood with Cush and Nimrod. I could have started before the flood. I could even go to many other parts of the world, including the Far East, India, Mexico and Central America, and show you all the moon god based belief practices which they established as a religion. But I elected to stay in the area around Israel, mostly Moses coming out of Egypt, the tribes marching into the Promised Land, and all the kings that ruled up to this point in the series. Tonight we're going to take a look at another king, Ahab. I won't be able to finish this particular message tonight, and I'll have to continue it next time. But I want you to understand, even though Israel sinned time and time again, and rebelled against God and followed false gods and false religions, mostly Baal and Ashtaroth, and growing the Asherah groves and placing Baal alongside, all part of the moon goddess. See, Ashtaroth, to give you a refresher real quick, was a moon goddess. And when you do the research, you'll find out that the moon goddess was actually the mother, according to these false religions. The mother goddess of who? Of Baal. They went hand in hand with each other. And here we pick up at verse 29 in chapter 16, 1 Kings. And let's just read it. And in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab, the son of Omri, to reign over Israel. And Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. So up to this point, now last time we looked at Manasseh, King Manasseh. Now he was the worst of the bunch. But Ahab was not that far behind. But up to this point, he did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. Now, we have taken that phrase, did evil in the sight of the Lord, and we've traced it through king after king. And where did we get that from? You go back to, real quick, to the book of Judges, chapter 2, and some of you have this memorized by now, but it's a good refresher. Anyway, chapter 2, verse 11. And the children of evil did evil, and the children of Israel, did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Baalim, a plural way of saying many gods of Baal. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, of the gods of the people that were round about them. They were instructed, they were warned not to do that, but they did it anyway. And bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth, the moon goddess. The moon goddess. The mother of Baal, which would make Baal a moon god also, by the way. So, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. And you'll see that phrase mentioned over and over again. King after king. There was more kings in Israel and Judah's day, kings in the north and kings of the south eventually, that did more evil in the sight of the Lord than there were kings that did things that were right in the sight of the Lord. That's history. And Ahab was no exception. But he took it to a different level. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. I'm back in 1 Kings 16, verse 30. And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing, for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. What do you mean the sins of Jeroboam? You go to 1 Kings chapter 12. We find what that actually is. 1 Kings chapter 12, starting with verse 25. Then Jeroboam, he became a king, the king of the north, when the kingdom split after Solomon's death. And Jeroboam built Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from thence. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, if the kingdoms of the north, where most of the tribes existed, went to Jerusalem, which had a different king over them, because they're the tribes of the south, they might rebel against me, in other words. So he came up with a plan, and this is his plan. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah. And they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. So he develops a scheme, and he follows through on it. Whereupon the king took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold. 2 calves of gold. And said unto them, it is too much of you to go up to Jerusalem. Now, we're not talking not a large distance. Now, I know they didn't have cars, they didn't have helicopters or planes. But in most cases, as they traveled in those days, it was either a day or day and a half distance, depending where you were. For instance, verse 25 says, and Jeroboam built Shechem. That was only 34 miles north of Jerusalem. 34 miles. So at most, a day and a half. An average day would consist, you could walk 20 miles for a traveler in those days in good health. Now, not everyone was 4 miles north of Jerusalem. Many were closer. But he said, oh, that's just too far for you to travel. Why waste the time? We could do it here, and we could do it better. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods. Underline this. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. That should have been their first clue. That this is the wrong direction to head a nation into. Especially the people of this nation. This is not like this was not ingrained in every Israelite. This was a story that was told over and over in their lifetime. It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. The first time that was told to someone or to the people coming out of Egypt, it led to disaster, destruction and death. Because why? Because God was angered with the people for forsaking him. Go to Exodus chapter 32. Exodus 32. Let's see where it's first mentioned. Exodus chapter 32. Yes, verse 4. Now, Moses is up on a hill and he's taking too long up there. Let's just start with verse 1 in chapter 32 in Exodus. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. That's a death wish right there. And that was proven over and over in their history. 20 to 40 years would go by on the average, and it's like either someone rewrote history or they forgot it completely. But their practices didn't allow them to forget it, so what so blinded them? I still marvel at it. The capacity that Satan and his minions have to blind people from the truth. Even though they grew up with it, it didn't matter. Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. A lot of those golden earrings were moon god ornaments, by the way. And all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them unto Aaron. And I already covered this before, but I'm just reminding you the famous last words, as we say today, that always brought disaster. And he received them at their hand and fashioned it with the graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. Not the first time calves were made as a representation of the false god, which, by the way, I don't know if you remember, I showed you pictures, and that calf probably was the calf that came out of Egypt. The design of what they used to worship there, and top of it was like a crescent moon, a reversed crescent moon, starting from the bottom to the top. Remember that? If you don't, you need to go back and refresh yourselves. And he received them at their hand and fashioned with a graving tool. And after he made it a molten calf, and they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. Sounds familiar? Verse 8. Now, let's continue the story. And when Aaron saw it, verse 5, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And the Lord said unto Moses, which was on top of the mount, Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way, which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, These be thy gods. Underline those words again. It's repeated here again in verse 8. Out of the mouth of Aaron, God was listening. He was communicating to Moses, but he was still listening what was happening in that camp. And he heard exactly what Aaron said, and he repeats it back to Moses, and Moses wasn't there to hear it. So God made sure that he knew what they were saying and doing. They have made a molten calf and have worshipped it. And have, by the way, worshipped it means bow down to it. Nothing's changed over all the centuries, millenniums. Believe me, that's why I'm against Chrislam. The unification of Christianity and Islam to somehow coexist with each other and bring a peaceful solution so that two so-called religions could get together and be together without any conflict. I'm sorry. As long as there's Islam, which is a representation of the moon god, I'm in confrontation with it. I don't physically go out there and confront it, as they do, eliminate life. I preach to them. I was going to bring the report. You'd be surprised how many listeners in September we had in these Middle East areas that are controlled by the eighth beast. I'm sorry. I have nothing in common with that, what they worship. It's an abomination to my Lord. That means it's an abomination to me. Will I keep preaching Jesus to Muslims? Absolutely. And anyone else. But I will not bow down to it for peace sake. And that's why, don't be too surprised as the clock keeps ticking towards the end. Either the messenger or the message will be silent, because it cannot coexist. I don't say that to scare you. I say it to lay down a principle that is biblical, that cannot and should not be changed. Woe to the one that change it to coexist. They made a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. Go back to 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28. Jeroboam, whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. The same evil spirits that controlled that situation back in Exodus was still alive and well in Jeroboam's day. What about, 500-600 years later? And he set the one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin for the people when two worship before the one, even up to Dan, which is further north. And he made a house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people. When they say lowest there is the ones that are not designated as priests by God's commandment, which were not of the sons of Levi. Get it, folks? So when you go back to chapter 16, And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. And it came to pass in verse 31, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. In other words, it was bad enough that he was walking, mimicking, continuing this abomination. That was bad enough. But it gets worse. Because he took a wife, if you continue in the verse, Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal. The golden calves is bad enough. But just in case the people didn't remember the stories well enough, in my opinion, of what those golden calves represented, they knew without any doubt what Baal meant and what making a grove, as it says in verse 33, meant. A grove for what? In the honor of Ashtaroth, where Ashtaroth and Baal could be in the high places with those groves, or from those groves statues, wooden statues would be made, and sometimes even stone statues, as a representation of these false gods. Got it? You had a double whammy here. You had a combination of blows. It was bad enough. And Scripture says, and it came to pass, if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, guess what? It gets worse. He took a wife named Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord of God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. Up to this point, he was the worst. He did more to anger the Lord. In this case, he made it a convenient excuse, continuing the sins of Jeroboam, for the people not to go down to Jerusalem, which was commanded on the feast days to worship. And also reintroduced Baal and Ashtaroth. Just can't get rid of them. Israel just couldn't get rid of them for any length of period of time. It's amazing how they can forget their history of what got them in trouble over and over again, but not forget. In fact, to be blinded. What caused it? Baal and Ashtaroth, along with the Asherah groves. Now, I eventually, in the next message, will get to Elijah from a different point of view. I preached on him before. But I'm also going to look at a different point of view, which I never have in the past, because those messages were for a different purpose. But Elijah had to deal with this problem. But up to this point, what we read here in chapter 16, we can see, even though he carried on the sins of Jeroboam, Ahab was completely subdued and dominated by Jezebel, by the reintroduction of these false gods and idols. Jezebel introduced again, key word again, the worship of Baal and Ashtaroth to Israel. This moon goddess, mother of Baal, was a power-hungry goddess, supposedly of love and sensuality. It could represent any desire, though, whatever you want. Somewhat like the prosperity gospel of their day. But in that case, love and sensuality. Why? Because that's how they would lure in the trap that they were creating to convince the Israelites not to go down to Jerusalem any longer. They'll make it convenient and desirable for you to participate in their activities that will bring you satisfaction, supposedly. Priestesses and prostitutes filled the shrines and serviced, it's the only way you can say, her worshipers. By the way, both male and female. The lure of the erotic encounters was more than the men and women of Israel could resist. Some say there were approximately 10 million Israelites in the area at that time in the northern kingdom. And they left the commandments of God to worship the false god of Baal and Ashtaroth, because their desires were being fulfilled. Now we'll find later in the Elijah story that about 7,000 people in the entire nation was not swayed by her control. Listen, the spirit of Jezebel is still living today. The spirit of Jezebel is the spirit of Antichrist. 7,000 people that were not swayed out of 10 million. That's less than 10% of 1%. Think about it. That's less than 10% of 1%. Not very many. Well, that same spirit still exists today. It's at work. In fact, in the book of Revelation, written about 2,000 years ago, or a little less than 2,000 years ago, chapter 2, verse 20, that church had to deal with it. That's not the subject matter tonight. That's for a different message. Somewhere in the future in this series, when I get to those churches. So why does the church today teach on some of the characteristics of the spirit of Jezebel? It's still in the works. And it leads always that if you allow to be succumbed by it, one way or another, you'll fall into some kind of false religion. Might not be the moon god religion, but in the beast case, it will be. So you should be taught and instructed to at least understand some of the characteristics so you are aware what to look for and to resist it when it comes. You look at Jezebel. I think I'm going to stop here and just deal with Jezebel a little bit. You look at the life of Jezebel and the spirit of Jezebel as referred to in Scripture. If you look at the word Jezebel, it means without cohabitation. Write it down in the margins there. Without cohabitation. Jezebel in Scripture and the spirit of Jezebel in the religion it encompasses, and we're focusing the moon god religion because that's where it came from originally and it still exists today in the eighth beast. she will not cohabit with those she cannot control and dominate. I'll prove that. She will not cohabit with those who she cannot control and dominate. We'll see that. And we'll see how that affected Elijah in my second message next week on this particular chapter and verses. And the reason why she will not cohabit with those she cannot control and dominate, because she believes she has no equals. Does it sound familiar? Does that sound familiar with Islam? Islam and that false religion, I even hate to call it a religion, but that's because you hear it over and over that it is. We'll just call it that for now. Doesn't believe it has any equals. Control is what Jezebel wants more than anything else here in Scriptures, and the spirit of Jezebel also is the same. Oh, this Jezebel, and here in Scriptures you'll see it if you read through the story in the next several chapters from these verses. But also even now, might appear, of course I've heard and read every frickin', and that's by the way I want to say it too, frickin' message on the spirit of Jezebel, and they take it out of the context that it was originally in to make some other point. And some of it's okay, but some of it's so far off base. What we're talking about is false religion, a moon god religion, with mother and son at its top of the leadership of that religion. And they don't share control or authority with anyone, because no one who believes in them believes that they have an equal unless they believe it also. Jezebel might appear to be submissive, but that is only a disguise, folks. Why? So it can gain influence to carry out the overall plan. You see that in Islam. A Jezebel spirit, starting with Jezebel here in the Bible, seeks control through what? Manipulation. And uses emotional pressure. That is very key in its pursuit of power. You're seeing that in the UN the last 4 weeks. Emotional pressure concerning the Palestinian cause, why they should have a state. Manipulation with the use of emotional pressure placed on a world for somehow is blind to the truth that it was never their inheritance in the first place. It uses subtle persuasion to get close and influence to those in control. The United Nations is just their puppet right now, and they're holding the strings. And they're pulling the strings. The United Nations don't even see it. They're allowing it to happen. The spirit of Jezebel uses this type of position it's given to gradually dominate folks. That's their overall goal. the moon god religion people. It's just named Islam now. It's just named the eighth beast. In fact, it was about a week ago I put all 8 beasts on the board. They all filled the spirit of Antichrist. By the way, also the spirit of Jezebel. And even though I put the Assyrian, the Babylonian, actually I start with the Egyptian, the Assyrian, the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, Rome, and the 7th and 8th beast, all those beasts had one common denominator, including Rome, which is dead, not alive, by the way. It will not be resurrected. Had one thing in common. They all had some type of worship of the moon god religion, including Rome. In fact, they had many, including the Grecians. You always hear the Zeus and this and that became popular. But those are aftermath additions. That was not the foundation of where they started their false worship of idols and gods that they created. That was based from the moon god religion. This has been Satan's masterpiece tool throughout the millenniums. What he has drawn as a line, established as a, let's call it a religious system again, to come against God's people. Period. Jezebel controlled by the moon god. As you see here in scriptures, and I'll take you to a point right now, will use power and influence of others to accomplish her goals and controls what she wants to control. You'll see a small example of that in 1 Kings chapter 21. I'll have time to go through it quickly. You see it in chapter 21, starting with verse 1. I'm going to read through these quickly, so keep up with me or read along with me. And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard. Give me thy vineyard. I want it, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house. Because it is near unto my house. And I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. I'm willing to make a fair deal with you. In fact, I'll even do better. Give me it. I want it. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my father unto thee. This is what Israel is facing today. They're being asked to give up their inheritance. It's not the Palestinians' inheritance, it's Israel's inheritance. If anyone with a half a brain would do the history study on it, including people in our government and in the United Nations, they can see that. And if we're a Bible-believing country, which I seriously doubt that anymore, that this is what governs us, but it once did to a certain extent, they would see that it goes all the way back to Noah's day when he issued out where the inheritance of land would be, or who the inheritance of land would be given to. Canaan stole it. It was never to be given to him in the first place. We've covered that in this series. Some of this is starting to make sense to you, and you can see how all these scriptures intertwine with each other, saying the same things over and over again. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. That's, like I said, what Israel's being asked to do today, to give up their inheritance for these Palestinians. Believe me, the British mandate was a sweet deal for the Arabs around the area. They got most of the land. But because they didn't get all of it, they have the Ahab spirit in this case. And because he eventually couldn't get his way, Jezebel took matters into her own hands. Let's read it. And Ahab came into the house heavy and displeased. He was turned down because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face, and he would eat no bread. Here's a powder, a champion powder. Pouter. I didn't get my way. I didn't get what I wanted. Poor me. My plight is so difficult. I deserve it. After all, it's convenient. It's right next to my palace. Why shouldn't I have it? Sound familiar? And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face, and he would eat no bread. But Jezebel his wife came to him and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad, that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I have spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite. And he said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said to him, Doest thou not govern the kingdom of Israel? The instigator behind the scenes. Arise and eat bread, and let thy heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. The spirit of Jezebel, through Islam, is still proclaiming from all the different nations of Islam, not the nation of Islam that we have here in the States. I'm talking about the nation surrounding that area in the Middle East that has Islam as its governing religion, is making the same promise that Israel will be destroyed. They will be wiped off the map. Well, I got news for them. Christ is going to do the wiping, and it's not going to be Israelites that are wiped out. Or else my Bible's a lie, and I don't think so. In fact, I know so. And Jezebel his wife said to him, Doest thou not govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thy heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name. She wrote letters in Ahab's name. I guess Ahab was pouting still, and he couldn't write the letter. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters to the elders and to the nobles that were in his city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letter, saying, Proclaim a fast and set Naboth on high among the people. In other words, set him up. Sound familiar today? Set him up. We'll use manipulation and emotional pressure to get what we want. That is the spirit of Jezebel that's alive and well in today's moon god religion, Islam. Putting pressure on the United Nations and governments around this world to get what they want, which does not belong to them. It's not their inheritance. Why is the world can't see that? And more importantly, why is most of the Christian world can't see that and stand up together and say, no, you'll still come at us, but guess what? Let me warn you. For those of you that still have ears to hear and eyes to read, not what some prophet in the desert made up in the Quran, but what thus say the word of the Lord. You're the ones going to be in the wrong end of the stick, and the stick is going to be heavy. Either be wiped out or be on the true Lord's side. Not all of us. And she wrote letters saying, Proclaim a fast and set Naboth on high, or in the top of the people. And set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king. And then carry him out and stone him that he may die. And the men of the city, even the elders and the nobles who were with the inhabitants in his city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them, and that was written in the letters which he had sent unto them. They proclaimed the fast and set Naboth on high among the people. And there came in 2 men, children of Belial, and set before him, and then the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. He was set up and he fell for it. Then they carried him forth out of the city and stoned him with stones, that he died. That is Islam's, the eighth beast, overall goal is destroy Israel. So what? I already covered this, some of the characteristics. So it can control and dominate the region. And that's just the launching point to control and dominate the world. Verse 14, Then they said to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which has refused to give thee for money. For Naboth is alive, but not alive, but dead. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, and Ahab rose up to go to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. Well, I got news for you. I got news for you. Come on down. If I was Israel, use whatever device and lies you want. Use whatever spirit of Jezebel that still remains in you. That's part of your moon god practice anyway. My Lord is bigger. And most of them don't even recognize still who that is. That's Jesus Christ. Because of his faithfulness, he will not turn his back, because he's promised to deliver them when all is said and done. So you can see that through power, influence, manipulation, emotional pressure, nothing has changed in today's world. Another characteristic, Jezebel often manifests within the most spiritual people. The most spiritual people. Once again, trying to manipulate, I can't even say it, others through her proclaimed, inspired messages. That's why it was important to have a false prophet in this last and final seventh and eighth beast. To be idolized as the prophet of Allah, who had the only true message, which was made up of lies, some of it stealing from other religions. And then proclaiming that it was inspired and he got visited by angels. Spirit of Jezebel will cause leaders to be suspicious of the church, the true church. And this is for you true Christians right now. And her messengers, which bear the testimony of Jesus Christ. Why? Because the spirit of Jezebel, the moon god religion, and its influences denies that God even had a son, an only begotten son. He was just another wise prophet, at best. You need to recognize, in fact, I have an article here about how it's trying to manipulate. You see that with Chrislam, and how Christianity and Islam is trying to find a peaceful way to co-inhabit. Guess what? The spirit of Jezebel doesn't co-inhabit with anyone. It mimics that they are through relaying possible peaceful solutions, but that's only to control and dominate the conversation, to eventually to dominate all religions. And those religions will bow down in one fashion or form to the moon god religion. Most of you don't even know about this yet, and maybe you do. The Saudis, Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah, underwrites an organization to bring world religions under one roof. They're putting out the money to establish this organization based out of Vienna in Europe. And of course, it's going to be backed by many, and it's going to be financed mostly by Saudi money. And it plans to have an organization with a governing body composed of 12 representatives from the world's 5 largest religions. Here, backed by Saudi Arabia, governed by an 8th beast religion that doesn't even allow its citizens to even consider another possibility except Allah and the restrictions they place on their citizens. Is trying to form, and not trying, they've already done it. It was working for 4 years, and now it's established. And in the next year, in 2012, I predict you'll be reading a lot more about them and hearing about what they're trying to accomplish. These are things that are happening in today's world. And once they sink their teeth into you, into the nations, into the religions, its true colors will come out. And the spirit of Jezebel wants to paralyze. It's a tool they use, and that is with fear, condemnation, depression, apathy, or whatever is useful for them. You'll see that with Elijah, who came against them. We'll see that next time. It wants to bring fear. And it's successful at doing that. Look at the world. You would never think 10 years ago after 9/11 that they could dominate so many conversations and work in so many areas claiming that they're the victim and getting things changed in their favor to establish their foundation in political and religious systems. It's amazing. If you'd have told me this 20 years, I would say you're definitely taking some wacky drugs because you're way off base. Maybe not 20 years, but maybe 25 years. I would say, I got to see it to believe it. Especially if I knew about 2001 and what happened with 9/11. It's amazing. They will sink their teeth in. They'll have the fear factor working for them. And they'll do whatever they need to do, or whatever it takes, until we withdraw from the truth. Until we withdraw from the truth about the moon god and its demonic spirit and the spirit of Jezebel. It's their mode of operation. We'll see it in the works and life of Elijah next time. I wish I had more time to continue this message tonight, but at least I got it started. Tune in next time, and I'll continue it. Play the song.